Video number 11 in the series on abuse. And sorry about that, I just shifted my camera around and got y'all lopsided and squiggly, and I am gonna figure this out. Give me just a minute. There, that's better. Okay, so welcome back to Whole Wellness with Ann. I'm Ann. Thanks for joining me. So we are doing a series on abuse. I have mentioned before, feel free to pop in at any point during this series. I've got many videos in this series, but they're all relevant. I will say though that the entire series is chronological, so it is helpful to start at the beginning, or at any point go back and just check out any of the videos. But I just wanted to let you know before we get started in video number 11 what this is about. We're discussing abuse because of many reasons that I discuss in video 1 and 2. And we just wrapped video number 10 discussing my parents' leadership in my household growing up and how their relationship shifted so greatly when I was around the age of 9 or 10, I'm guessing. And when their relationship shifted greatly, and I discuss the earliest memory I have from around that age that for me was devastating. A devastating experience for them, I think for my mom especially, and also for me and my little sister. I don't know if my siblings know about it. I mentioned that in video number 10. But now we're going to get into more of my parents' relationship, how it shifted, what the dynamic was in our home between them and as parents, how they behaved with us. And it's primarily a story I'm telling you to kind of set the stage for how I developed and to kind of set the stage of the dynamic between me and my siblings and how in certain situations it did not work well. It was not a really loving home. As I've mentioned before, I do believe that my parents loved us all. I don't know that they ever loved each other. And it made for a traumatic childhood. It was, I shouldn't say traumatic childhood. What I mean is a painful childhood. Mentally and emotionally, and just constant chaos and constant drama. We were safe, depending on what your meaning of safe is, but there was no fear for our lives. There was no fear about being fed. There was no fear about being left or anything like that. So there wasn't that kind of traumatic abuse. It was all this mental and emotional anxiety and drama and fear and control and manipulation and just mind games and constant antagonism between my parents. And each one of my siblings has a very different memory and a different experience and a different, depending on the line, where they fell in the line in their relationship with my parents and how they adapted to the environment that we were all raised in. So I'll just get started on this video number 11 and continue with the dynamic between my parents and how it heavily influenced us, and particularly me, because this is a story about my experience growing up. Now, as I mentioned, my parents' relationship shifted majorly around my age of 9 or 10. And that is when I started noticing things were not good in my home. Prior to that, I had many, many pleasant memories of holidays and activities and playtime. But I also grew up in a good Catholic home, and divorce was not an option for my parents. And they stayed together because of the kids. And it caused major heartache and major stress for me and a lot of anxiety. Because my mom talked to me as though I was her little BFF. At some point in time, she just started talking to me like I was her little BFF. I'll get into that a little bit in a little bit. So my mom, who didn't have the attention she needed when she was growing up and was neglected, she went into the marriage and motherhood just always trying to get my dad's approval and seeking his attention and wanting to talk to him and have him listen to her. And so when he moved out, when my youngest sibling graduated from high school and didn't file divorce, she filed a divorce, in my opinion, just to stick it to him and show him how tough she was and she's not the weakling that he must think she is or whatever. And she never even wanted a divorce. It wound up hurting her more than it hurt him. But then again, she had been married to this guy for almost 40 years. And my dad, when he moved out, told all of us adult kids that he hoped by moving out that my mom would get a clue and change. He didn't have to change, of course, but he hoped she would change. So much for compromise. You know, that's one thing my dad has never been willing to do, is compromise. And we'll get into that shortly. So that's the story of my parents as far as like the current day. To this day, my mom has not learned, and this is very important and significant for anybody out there who has not received the validation they've needed in their life from childhood all the way through like their marriage. My mom has not learned, to this day, she's in her 70s, she's 73, 74. My mom has not learned that very important lesson that doing harmful things or doing harmful behaviors just to get my dad's or someone else's attention does not work. It only hurts yourself. It only hurt her, ever, because people never delivered in the way she wanted or expected them to. And generally, when you do things to get someone's attention, they're not going to deliver. Look up expectations. It's very interesting. In any case, my mom was not healthy. You know, when I was a teenager, I believe she threatened suicide a couple of times. And I remember being so frustrated and so exhausted with her drama and mind games that at one point I just went, fine, go for it. Because I don't know what else you're looking for, what other kind of attention you're looking for. I'm not kidding you when I say my mom, to this day, she is that person who you cannot make happy. There is nothing you can do to make her happy. And that was probably a major problem between my mom and dad, because he was not an emotional person and she was, and there was no way he was going to be taken in by her manipulation. I'm pretty sure too that she probably had a couple of mental imbalances too that she probably should have sought treatment for, but she's also the type of person who has always looked down on counseling or therapy and thought it was for crazy people. And I am kind of the mind, and I've said to her, well, then I'm a crazy person. I mean, I'm totally fine with that. You know, if you want to call me crazy, call me crazy. I don't see the stigma. I don't see how that's bad. I don't see why. I mean, and I guess that's part of the reason I'm doing this channel, is because if you're crazy, welcome to my world. You know, welcome to the club. We're all a little bit crazy, huh? I mean, and that's okay. I got your back. You got my back. It's better than being alone and thinking you're better than everybody else, or thinking you're 100% healthy and you got no issues, and being miserable up here and in here, I guess, in my opinion. So anyway, the dynamic between my parents. So somewhere along the lines, they grew to hate each other. I don't remember when it was. I don't know how it happened. I'm sure it was over a series of many events, many of which I probably don't even know about, where they just grew to resent each other so greatly. And I mentioned in the prior video that I really did have a fun and memorable, in a positive way, early childhood. So happy. And it all changed so quickly over what seemed like a very short period of time, like maybe 2 years. And I don't know if there's other stuff I don't remember, things that happened that I don't know about, but it all seemed to change very quickly. And that memory I talked about of the event that happened, finding my mom's letter about my dad's threats to her in this huge fight and being sold a line of bull by my dad and him not taking accountability, that was a significant and pivotal point in my childhood. Because then I started to pay attention to my parents. And that was just me being an empath, and I could feel and see everything with them. It was horrible. And being who I am, that's also, I think, what sets me apart from my siblings. No one else, I'm sure, in my family, as far as siblings, even probably had a clue that any of this was going on. They probably had no clue that all the things I was observing and feeling and taking on, all these energies from my parents, that was me being who I was born to be, and how I was born. They probably didn't have a clue. They probably didn't see any of it. They might have seen a few things here and there that were really loud and, you know, major conflicts. But overall, I mean, on a daily basis, I saw and felt and heard about from my mom, my parents' agony and misery in their relationship and their dissatisfaction and unhappiness. So I spent my preteen, teen, young adult years watching the dynamic of a husband and wife that absolutely were horrid to each other. I basically had the benefit, though, of growing up and learning how not to be a wife, how not to be a married couple. And I swore I would never, ever, 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 ever marry a man like my dad. But my parents did show us kids love in their own way. Not in a way that I really understood so much from my dad. My mom was very affectionate, though. She gave affection very freely. We never had to ask her. She would hug us, put her arms around us, kiss us. You know, she would hold our hands. She would laugh and joke with us and get down on the floor and play with us. She taught us how to do our chores and helped us. And she made us, in the summer when we were out of school, she made us delicious picnic lunches. She would make this huge platter of bologna sandwiches and this huge pitcher of Kool-Aid, and we would just come running in from outside, hork down a bunch of sandwiches and a big glass of Kool-Aid and be running back outside. And then she baked cookies and made Christmas so special, baking and decorating, and so much work shopping for 6 children plus a husband, and Christmas cards, and oh my gosh. My mom worked very hard to make our home a home. But I was the first girl in my family, and then there were 3 more babies. So of course I was like assistant mom. I was ordered or expected to be assistant mom, assistant to my mom. I was changing diapers and cleaning diapers and watching babies and feeding babies from very early on. And I didn't like it, but it was one of my chores. It was one of the things I had to do. And I remember my mom saying that she never agreed with my dad on this, that they let the babies cry themselves to sleep. Now, a lot of people disagree on this. I'm one of those people that's not a believer in letting the baby cry themselves to sleep, especially infants, like young babies, you know. But my parents did not believe that. Apparently my dad, this is one of those things, I'm sorry, but I cannot wrap my head around this. A little baby that is 4 months old does not know the first thing about manipulation. So a little baby is not gonna cry just to be held because it's a trick and he's trying to trick the mom or pull the wool over their eyes, or this is the reality of the logic of my parents, my dad specifically. My 2 oldest brothers had bedrooms in our basement. We had a finished full basement, and so they never had to deal with this. I was the one who had the bedroom right next to the baby's room on one end of the house, and my parents would be staying up late watching TV in the other end of the house. And I spent every night for a couple of years just listening to the wail of infants, because remember, my sister was born when I was 4. So I first had to listen to her scream herself to sleep. And then she got to be 2, and then my second youngest brother was born, and so I listened to it again with him, and then he grew a little bit, and then 2 years later, my other youngest sibling was born, and I had to listen to it again, screaming babies all the time. And I believe that that is why when I became an adult and my husband and I got married, we had agreed we would never have children. And I think that's why I was of that mind, because I hated changing poopy diapers. I hated feeding the babies. I was young. I was a young girl, and I hated listening to the wails of the poor babies. And even further later on, after my parents were done having kids, they became foster parents, and we had little babies coming through the home all the time, and I still had to take care of them. You know, I didn't have a say in whether or not we had any foster children, but I had to look after them, you know. And anyway, I remember being terrified that something was happening to the babies when they would wail at night. And it literally terrified me. And my parents, because they were out in the living room watching TV, I thought I could get away with going into the baby's bedroom and kind of comforting them. I reached through the bars and kind of pet them on their back and try to comfort them. Well, I got busted one time and got in trouble. So I never did that again. But I had nothing to do to help, to soothe the babies. I just had to suffer listening to this. As I got a little bit older, my mom, like I mentioned, started to talk to me like I was her BFF. In fact, I don't think I was actually that old. I think I was probably 10 or 11 when my mom started talking to me like I was her little BFF and telling confidential things about her and my dad, and things that were inappropriate to talk to her daughter about. And the one thing that we knew growing up, but was an elephant in the room, was that my mom had suffered traumatic abuse in her child, sexual abuse, but we don't know to what extent and how it happened or who did it or anything like that. Possibly her dad, maybe even her brothers. I really don't know. And my mom never got well. She never sought therapy. She thought, like I said, that it was for crazy people. My mom never loved herself. She just went her entire life, even to this day, from devastation to devastation, from devastation to devastation, from one emotional upheaval to the next. She was high and then she was low, and then she was high and then she was low. It was just extreme all the time. All the time, volatile. And you cannot make my mom happy, no matter what. Like, you were always walking on eggshells, walking on broken glass with her. You could wake up in the morning and walk out of your bedroom and not know which mom you were going to get, because you have no idea. You know, there was never any of this. Never any steady, reassured, solid, you know, I'm going to wake up in the morning, I want to go give mom a hug. I know she's going to be smiling, giving me a hug back, and all this other stuff. You never knew. You never knew who you were going to get. But she carried her own wounds from childhood, and she never healed from them. She never was interested in healing from them. She is of the mind, in my opinion, to this day, because I've talked to her a number of times about this, about healing, about getting help, things like that, and she refuses to accept or admit that there's anything wrong with her, that she struggles in any way, shape, or form, even though she could be sobbing from heartache and telling you that. It does not click with her. She could be hurt by a leaf falling out of the tree and sobbing and not realize that something is not right. So that's what being injured from abuse can do to you, and how badly it can scar you and can carry on to other generations. It's called generational trauma or generational abuse. And with that, we're going to wrap video number 11 here. Thank you so much for joining me. And coming up in video number 12, we're going to talk about my dad and the dynamic, how he was as a person, as a dad, as a parent, and what he went through as a child, which I don't have a whole lot of details on, but just to kind of give you a perspective of the type of person we're dealing. I gave you my mom's kind of overview, and now I'm going to give you my dad's in video 12, and then we'll get into how they were as parents together and a married couple. Thank you so much for joining me. Take care of you and have an awesome day. Bye.